Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to the 2019 Academic Seminar of Esports. Thank you very much indeed for coming today to a series of presentations that will describe academic learning and possible future development of esports. My name is Marcus Jang. I'm from the International Esports Federation. I will be the moderator of this year's academic session. To build up a hub for esports research, Esports Academic Center project has been initiated last year as a part of Global Esports R&D Center, which is a 2018 and 22 plan. The Esports Academic Seminar is one of the main projects of Esports Academic Center to promote esports research and have a sustainable esports academic event. We will have 4 separate presentations today at this seminar. The first presentation will be about esports motivation. As a short introduction, we will now discuss of the academic point of view and research movements that are held in this field. I would like to ask your interest and questioning of how to accommodate with these researches into your field and industries and interests. Now let's start with our first speaker, Professor David P. Hedlund, Associate Professor of St. John's University of New York. Let's welcome Professor David P. Hedlund.
All right, thank you everyone. Well, good morning. I'm going to try to work off some of what we just heard in the most recent presentation or the panel discussion about some of the education that's going on. St. John's is deeply involved in this area. We have designed a gaming major, if you will, where we're incorporating classes from across the business and kinesiology and communications and computer science, cybersecurity, a lot of these all into academic courses. So there are certainly discussions we can have about the education side. But one of the main points I'd also like to make that mirrors some of what we just heard in the panel session is a little bit about some of the research collaboration. There are a growing number of academics, several of us here in the room, who have, in my case specifically, who've shifted all of our research from, mine originally was business, marketing, and consumer behavior, then moving a little bit to the analytics side, and now almost all of my research is esports focused. So a little bit about my background. Like many people that I've met here, I was a former professional athlete. In fact, 14 years ago, I was here in Busan as a national team coach for the under-17 Women's AFC Championships here in Busan. So it's kind of ironic that now I'm back 14 years later. I think we could probably sing some songs about that, Kumbaya and whatnot. But after my playing career and coaching career came to an end, I was an entrepreneur. So spent some time building up companies, events, and marketing companies, working with Jay-Z and Missy Elliott and a lot of these kind of musical acts as they traveled the world doing bilingual marketing and communications, things of that sort. And so more recently though, I've shifted to esports and video games. So today, I'm involved in more than a dozen research projects going on around the world on many topics within esports and video gaming. So my goal first and foremost is, many of you in this room, you may be from federations. And so one of the first questions that I often get asked is, well, what about the opportunity to get research? Help us understand our markets. Help us understand motivations. For example, just before I left New York the other day, I got the Nico Partners. I don't know if many of you have seen this, Nico Partners, who focuses on the Asian esports marketplace. They produce this free report. And so some of the research that I've done actually mirrors a lot of the research that they do as well. So I'll refer to that in a few minutes. So there are opportunities for federations to work with academics. One of the really interesting points is that academics want to disseminate our research widely. In contrast with the IP rights holders. When they do research, they're going to keep that research to themselves. Many of them, they're scared that if they were to share their research findings with the broader at large world, they might lose some of their competitive advantage. And so a lot of the research that the game developers may be conducting does not see the light of day outside of their own companies. And so this is where academics are specifically well suited, because that's what we want to do. In fact, we get credit from our universities for engaging in these kind of activities. So we are a great source for federations. In addition, in fact, I do research for some of the Overwatch League teams. So the Owl League, many of you may be familiar with the game Overwatch. It's one of the more advanced, at least in kind of an international perspective, franchise systems for video game competitions, with teams now in Europe, North America, Asia, other places around the world. So I have the opportunity to do research with some of the local teams in the United States. And so for academics, we are always interested and willing to help and apply our knowledge to some of these situations. So some of my research stems from some of these very practical questions. Now, I would love to tell you about all of these, but we would be here all afternoon. And so I'm going to try to do this presentation as quickly as possible. So I want to give you 2 examples of some of the research that my colleagues and I have done before I get into the heart and soul, which, by the way, is also on a poster outside as well. So we've heard a lot about sports and traditional sports and esports. So obviously one of the first areas where we've spent some time is trying to compare. So understanding, okay, based on people who play traditional sports, people who play esports, how do you feel? What are some of your behaviors? And then, of course, connecting to that business side. So as a consumer behavior and marketing researcher, we then ask some of these future likelihood types of questions. And so then we can actually get into this opportunity to compare some of these things. So for how long have you played? How many hours a day do you play? How many hours do you watch? Now, one of the most interesting things I want to point out here is across the board, behaviors and the likelihood of future behaviors all favor traditional sports right now. However, if you look right here at how many hours a day do you play, pretty darn close. In fact, if you like mathematics and statistics, all of the others are significant differences. That one is not, even when the sample size is in the thousands. So pretty soon we are speculating that the amount of time that people on average are going to be spending playing esports compared to traditional sports, it's going to switch, where they're going to be playing more esports. So some of this is convenient. You know, we have supercomputers in our pockets. Now, I hate playing most games on my phone because it's just too darn small, but there are plenty of games out there, mobile games, that are conducive to this kind of environment. So this is just one example of some of the research that academics are conducting. Give you a second one. So later today I will be on the panel for health and nutrition. So I'm not going to overly spend a lot of time on this, but several people, I've had the opportunity to meet some of the individuals from the Mexican Federation, the Portuguese, the Danish, the Swedish, just in the last day, and they were asking about this. So this is an open content, so this is the British Medical Journal. So if you were to Google this, you can get the PDF for this. So this was done with some colleagues of mine at New York Institute of Technology. In fact, I can tell you, we're already 2 studies beyond this. This is kind of if you're going to be concerned about the health and wellness of esports athletes, what do we need to concern ourselves with? So this lays out a framework. We've now done the follow-up studies. Okay, what are you eating? What are you drinking? What vitamins are you taking? How much caffeine are you ingesting? How many calories are you ingesting? What are you doing before games, during games, after games? Essentially, we have life diaries now from esports players from across the gamut, understanding what are they doing all throughout the day? How well are they taking care of themselves? To give you just a sense of what that looks like, I've created this kind of color-coded chart. So we asked people about the foods that they're eating, the drinks that they're drinking, not alcoholic. Drinking has 2 meanings in English. So what beverages are they drinking? But then how much sleep are they getting? And then we split them up. So this is a little bit of kind of some clustering and grouping. So those who are from here, people who are just playing a little bit, all the way down to the professional players. And just by the colors, you can get a pretty good sense as to what's going on. So the foods that they're eating. Now, I'm just going to give you one snapshot of the results because I don't want to steal my thunder from later. But what we've found so far is that professional esports players, they take very good care of themselves on the health and wellness side. They don't sit for 8, 10, 12 hours that they're getting up. They're doing yoga, they're doing stretching, they're engaged in other kinds of activities, whether it's pool or ping pong, mahjong, other types of activities, that they're not just sitting in front of a computer, that they realize this is not good for their health. They're eating right. Now, some of this is they have the benefits of a lot of resources. If they're playing for 100 Thieves or another franchise, they're gonna have a sports psychologist, they're gonna have a sport nutritionist who's gonna help them with these kind of issues. But there are academics out there who are also engaged in some of this type of research. And again, the goal is let's get this research out there for public consumption. So that then leads to the purpose of this particular discussion, which is why are people playing esports? So it's a question that the last panel was asking, and it's something where my colleagues and I have spent a lot of time. So this is coming out actually in about 2 weeks in this book. It's so new, we don't even have cover art for the book yet. That's how new this is. So Understanding Esports, I don't know what chapter it's, chapter 14, somewhere in there. So in the very simplest of terms, here's what we were trying to do with this. Why are people playing esports? Create ways in which we could measure the motivations for people who are playing esports. And then we just wanted to start out very simple. Try to see, are there any relationships between what we discover and how much time people are playing esports during the day. So if, again, academics, we try to make it easy. Knock on wood, sometimes we fail. So we investigated 122 motivations. So it's not the biggest motivation study out there. There is one that's in the 130s, but we identified 122 separate motivations. I apologize for the size of the font, but hopefully you can at least read some of these things. So you can see everything from escape, to feelings, to that there are games available to play, to performing and outperforming others, to taking interest in other people, pretending, fantasy, all sorts of different kinds of potential motivations. I'm not going to bore you with the statistics because most people, their face just kind of goes blank when you start going there. So a little bit about who we were looking for here. So almost 1,200 people were a part of this research study, about 80% North American based, 20% international. Again, we're doing this in English to save some of the time on translation. So again, we were working with an English speaking population. But then we used quite a few statistical methods on this. So what did we find? So we found 6 kind of macro factors about what is motivating people to play esports. So socialization, positive affect. So again, I apologize, in English a lot of words have multiple meanings. In this case, affect is talking about emotions. Whenever we talk about marketing, affect is emotions. So emotions and feelings. Competition, fantasy and escape, coping, and then just passing or, let's be frank, wasting time. So the reason why 3 are green and 3 are red is when we then move on to, we wanted to look at the relationship between these factors and then how many hours a day are people playing esports. Are there any relationships here? And we found 3 of them. So socialization, positive affect, and competition. So number 1, people are motivated to play because they want to connect with other people. I mean, if people don't understand, I mean, this is probably the most fundamental piece of esports. When it was video games back in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, a lot of people were metaphorically in their basements playing the South Parkization, eating Hot Pockets, drinking Mountain Dew, whatever, all by themselves. Now with esports, we have this opportunity to connect with other people, to make new friends. So, in fact, I speak several languages, Chinese, Japanese, French, Spanish. Some of this, I've even started learning some Korean because when you play, you have the opportunity to socialize. So you can learn some of these different languages. So, important. Positive affect is interesting. The relationship here is negative. So, in fact, have any of you ever heard someone say, I'm going to keep playing until I win? We believe that that's what's going on here. That it's kind of this people, if you win, you feel satisfied and okay, I won, I'm gonna stop playing. Kind of like gambling. You win a couple of bucks and then you're done. But if you are losing, you're gonna keep playing because I'm frustrated. Why can't I win? Come on, just give me a good matchup so I can beat this person. And so this is what we think we are seeing here. So I was speaking to some colleagues last night and there were some discussions of esports is a great venue for people to learn how to win and to lose. In real life, we're not always gonna win, despite what our parents probably told us as kids. We can't always get what we want. So there is this opportunity that we can learn some of these skills through esports. But what we are seeing here is people want to keep competing until they win, until they feel some satisfaction. I won, okay, finally, I won a match. Okay, I'm done. Now can you imagine this with Overwatch, where a game could take 30 or 40 minutes? How much time they may need to spend in order to win a game? Could take a lot. And then of course this competition aspect. So this is both, we're finding individual competition. I want to take my skills and put them against your skills. But I also want to get together with my friends or other players and then try to see, hey, as a team, can we beat your team? And in fact, at the federation level, now we see this with many things we see at the Olympic level. National pride. Now we've got American esports playing against Canadian esports. That in fact, now we have this alternative venue for these international competitions, which is esports and national pride in some of these opportunities. So fantasy, escape, coping, passing, wasting time, we believe these are important factors as well, just not when it comes to how much time you're playing during the day. So we're already on to some future studies where we're adding more outcome variables and trying to figure out what's going on. So I've just kind of discussed some of these things. So the last thing that I wanted to kind of share, and I'm glad we have some other academics in the room. So when I first started some of this research 2 years ago, there weren't very many people who were engaged in it. And so as the panelists prior to this panel were discussing, there is this opportunity to do research. And so for academics, the opportunity to connect with one another. You know, I've got 7 research areas that I'm doing, more than a dozen studies. You can only imagine what my wife thinks sometimes, and how busy I might be with calls with people around the world. But there are these opportunities to help advance our understanding. Just because something is a way in the United States, North America, does not mean that's the way in Asia or in Europe. So we need international research collaboration, some sort of agenda in order to make this possible. So with that, again, this is to the points, fast. So I'm happy to answer questions on this research if you want to talk about other research. I'm happy to answer some of those questions. Marcus, I know you were going to kind of moderate this in some way perhaps, if you like.
First of all, since you just mentioned about Q&A, be freely to ask any questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand.
Looks like you already got some, your mouth is already opening. That's the advantage of an academic. We know when students are about to ask a question.
Yeah, I've studied biomedical sciences, so I'm a little bit in the research area, and I do follow research as I use the content of the papers in the education I give to students and parents mainly, or for consulting. And I was just wondering what the paper was named again, or the
Oh yeah,
journal,
sure. Get your phone out. Take a photo.
Yeah, I took a picture of one of the graphs.
Absolutely. You can take this one, but that one. So the citation's down at the bottom. So it's open access. So a lot of academics
on PubMed or whatever.
on BMJ. Just Google it and you'll find the article. So they have a small sample. I think like 70 people. Again, we always start off small. There's some great research that just came out of Canada. I actually think I may have brought it with me. Let me just check. So they were looking at the Association of Screen Time, Depression, and Adolescence. So what they found is playing esports, video games, does not have a negative relationship with adolescents feeling depressed. That in fact, social media does. That people are engaging in probably an evaluative or comparative kind of activity. They're looking at other people's Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, something like this. I believe this is open source as well. So it's kind of interesting that social media, bad for people's health, gaming, potentially good, question mark. And then again, this is where academics have this opportunity. And we're doing some of this. I mean, in the United States, the politicians like to say that video games and esports cause mass murder, mass casualty events. So we have some preliminary research that contradicts that finding. But again, this is what academics do. So if you want to talk about that, I'm happy to talk about that too. I'm a tenured professor, which means my mouth is open.
There's one.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have two questions.
Sure.
First, you do a survey about the esports motivation, and is your survey online or offline?
So we do a lot of our surveys in mixed methods.
Okay, mixed methods.
So today, if you want a real high quality survey, you're gonna have to work with a market research firm.
Yes.
You're gonna pay $8 to $12 minimum per person.
Mm-hmm.
So we found an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
We like, when we do online surveys, we like Amazon Mechanical Turk.
Mm-hmm.
We can get, a lot of these surveys that we've done are Mechanical Turk, we can get a response for 30 cents.
Mm-hmm.
So these have been very effective when it comes to getting very high quality samples.
Okay.
The problem is getting the highest socioeconomic groups. That's been a challenge because in order to get their opinions, you really have to offer them a lot.
Okay.
But we've been pretty good at finding some of these mixed methods ways of collecting data.
Okay, I understand you do kind of mixed research of online and offline. My
Mhm.
second question is, do you find some, how can I say, correlation between the which kind of game do they play and how do they motivate themselves?
So we have that data, although we have not analyzed that data yet.
Okay.
Again, it's myself and a few others who are specifically involved with this specific research. What we're kind of finding, there's 6 or 7 major types of games, the MOBAs and fighting games and sports games and things of this sort. So especially in the sports games, what we know is many people who have an interest in traditional sports, they like these games. But what we found is people who come from, let's call it a STEM background, science, technology, engineering, and math,
Yes.
they hate
Oh.
those sports games
Okay.
with a passion.
Okay.
It's when we first uncovered some of these results, we were so surprised. When they ranked what's our favorite type of game and what game do we hate, our scale wasn't even big enough to contain their hatred for some of these sports games. Now, in an American context, we could say this is the nerds versus the jocks.
And the jacks.
We could speculate that something like this may be going on
I see.
in terms of some of this, but again, we've only begun to look at just some of this.
I see.
That's why we need more international research collaboration.
That's fine. It's kind of, how can I say, the nerd dislike the people like the.
It's
football
one possible
player.
explanation.
Yeah, it's kind of very. I know it's kind of biased, but. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I got it.
Yes,
Thanks for your talk, really interesting.
absolutely.
Just to pull up on that one, and that's why the mixed methods is so important. Anytime you go into the States and you look at the fighting game community, you'll see much larger black community going in and playing Tekken because they've got access to it, playing NHL, playing NBA 2K. So that nerds versus jock thing is really context dependent. So I think that's where it's really important to remember, big data is one thing, but that sort of close, seeing what's happening on the floor is really important to get the nuance.
If I could just add one more point on top of that. So this sample, 66-34 male-female. You would be hard-pressed to find another study with such a high female population where they have not had to manipulate or offer severe enticements, or they've gone to like female communities in order to get some of this. So this is a big challenge, I think. Now, the interesting thing is I do a lot of work in China. So in China, when you look at some of the mobile games, some of the more casual players, there's more women than men in China playing a lot of these type of games. But when you get up to that higher competitive professional level, that's when it really starts to skew male. So it's kind of like business consumer behavior research 30 years ago, where people started off in the beginning, okay, let's look at men, let's look at women, let's look at different ages, let's look at different clusters, something like this. But I think soon we're going to get to kind of some of the psychographics, where it's going to be like, how much do you identify with this thing, this person, this brand, where we're going to be looking at a lot of these things and then get to some of the behavioral segmentation. So, and then your follow-up?
I have another completely other question.
Oh, sure.
It's actually going back to your, I'm going to keep playing until I win.
Sure.
Who are the players then? What games, what demographics, and what level? Because the level of expertise in terms of how if you keep going once you fail is quite significant.
Sure. So I'm just gonna stay here on this slide because these are the demographics. So when we actually looked at the demographics of who took this sample, who's part of the sample, a very representative. Now, again, because we're not pegging it directly to the sample population, because we added in international elements, there's no real guidelines that we can put forward about how many. I mean, it should be 50-50 male, female. Probably on socioeconomics, it's going to be a little bit more on the lower side than on the higher side, something like this. But in terms of what we can get access to, and we've tried everything from partnering with esports organizations and high school leagues and things like this to using Mechanical Turk to paying, $8, $10, $12 per survey response in order to get nationally representative samples. And when you balance all of these things for the academics, and the fact that I don't know how much funding you get, but I don't get a lot, the Mechanical Turk, a lot of these systems seem to be the best in terms of getting the best quality sample, where, for example, 49 to 50 states. So 30 years old on average. So where the data is not skewing towards the, let's say, 16 to 23.
Yeah, so
which
if
is what a lot of
it's
people focus on.
30-year-olds on average, and they're saying, I'm going to keep playing until I win. Are we actually talking about esports? Are we talking about people who are just playing games often, regularly? Yeah, and what's the skew? So what's...
Yep. So we've tried to figure out, because there's an interesting discussion about what's an esport and what's a video game.
Yeah.
Because there could be a difference. For example, I play Clash of Clans. Is Clash of Clans an esports or is it a video game? And in fact, there's one mode that is kind of more of a, you're just playing against the AI of the computer or whatever device. And then there's another one where it's kind of a head-to-head. So it's actually kind of a hybrid type of model here. So we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do this. So this sample is all people who are playing what you and I would consider to be the traditional esports, the League of Legends, the Dotas, where you can use the internet to compete directly against others, either in a one-on-one or in a multi-group format. So it's not whatever games you might think that someone just plays on PlayStation 1 or Xbox in their basement, just by themselves. These are the games where you're connecting with other people. So we've tried to focus that just on that kind of market. So yes, I think, again, we have a list of about 30 or 35 games that we classify in this way. So the PUBGs, the Fortnites, so we cover all the different types of games, even iRacing, Forza, some of these racing car games where they do have this esports function. How are we doing on time?
Okay, we can have one more question for the last, for time's sake, or if there's...
Sure.
Maybe I have a final one. I was just wondering if it's not a good idea once upon a time to have a sort of research platform with just gaming and esports research, because it's so everywhere that it's sometimes very difficult to find research about this industry, which might also limit your work to make it published internationally and make it known.
So when I first started writing these things for scholarly publications, probably it's only been since 2017 that people are manifestly focusing on esports. That 15, 16, 17, that's when the shift from video games to esports kind of occurred. So the publishing cycle is oftentimes a year to 2 years, which means when you read research, it was probably done at least 1 or 2 years ago, which means that 2015, if the research is coming out in 17, probably was done in 15, 16. So we really only have 4 years of research on a lot of these topics. And of course, what we've predominantly started to see is they've taken ideas from sport management research and applied it to esports. Why are people playing? Why are people spectating? Why are people going to events? A lot of this kind of research. That's as far as we've gotten to a large extent, that there hasn't been a whole lot. So when it comes to a research agenda, there really isn't one yet. Although, some of you know Tobias Schultz from Germany. They've created a research network in Europe with a stated goal of exactly this. Trying to identify, okay, let's start to conduct research in these 6 or 7 different areas. And let's centralize it, let's kind of work together on it. And then, so it's not like we're all moving in divergent ways. We're kind of all organized and kind of moving together.
Just like for me, I used to be a medical student. We also always went to like medicine or PubMed, which are like the medical papers.
Mm-hmm.
I thought like working in the industry for 13 years now, it might also be beneficial. I'm interested in research to have some kind of platform in the future where also like these kind of research is about addiction and adolescence, but also esports research can be centralized, which makes it easy to find.
So privately, I can tell you, a lot of the people who are involved in this, they've kind of made private commitments to one another that we will find the $2,000 to make our research open access, because so much of this is so important, especially on the medical side. That's why Joanne and company from NYIT, that BMJ article, is open access, because we realize how important this is. Just the traction that research got in the United States, Newsweek and Times and the New York Times and all of the major TV stations all picked up, oh, there was this research about people and the health and wellness of people playing esports, published today in the British Medical Journal. So we're trying our best. The publishers don't make it very easy because it's oftentimes like over $2,000 to get it open access, but we're trying to get it out there. So a lot of us, we've made commitments that, you know, we will go to our academic bosses and say, we need this. This is important research. But the other way to do it is find people who are doing this research, connect with them, and help.
Just to add that connection, I've just tweeted out a really great resource which has collected everything since 2003 on esports, and that comes from T.L. Taylor, who's done one of the first major events.
Yeah, she's up at MIT.
Yeah.
So yeah.
She's got a great resource, and like you're saying, a lot of it isn't open access, but you know, everyone's friendly in academia. If you ping those people, they will give you those texts.
People are even more friendly in esports. Someone was complaining on LinkedIn the other day about how many times they get asked for resources. And I just scoffed. I didn't outwardly do it, but I just scoffed privately, like, come on. You know, this is a brand new field. If we want this developed, you gotta help. So anytime anyone comes to me, doctoral students, whomever, I'm always willing to talk to them, get on a conference call with them, do whatever we can to advance this agenda. And that's the great thing about esports. This kind of good luck, have fun, kumbaya within esports also goes over into the academic setting. A lot of these people are gamers. So I think we have to,
Yes,
because
for time's sake, I think we could end this session for now. Let's give a round of applause for Professor.
if you want it.
Absolutely.
So we will be back. The next session will be at 1300 about a theoretical analysis of esports, and it will be held